What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
Aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Friday, November 30th, 2018, end of the month. Tomorrow, of course, being December 1st here. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. We have a lot to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room. And for those of you who have been asking, Claire is doing a little bit better, but we decided it was probably best that she not try and do the show today. So she's in the other room resting, and I'll be peeking in on her during the commercial breaks here. So let's get right on into it. Obviously, the big story is this massive earthquake they've had up there in Alaska. And apparently they've had I guess it's expired, a tsunami warning in effect for the Cook Inlet area, southern Kenai Peninsula in Alaska. And originally it was reported as a 6.6, then the USGS said it was a 7.0. I saw one televised report that said it was a 7.2, but whatever the number actually is, massive, massive amounts of damage. As a safety precaution, they have shut down the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, the big oil pipeline. They're sending out teams to inspect it, make sure that it wasn't damaged, it's not leaking oil. Apparently, the Seward Highway has collapsed, it's closed down. Pretty much the entire city of Anchorage is on a shelter in place because everything's just messed up. The only thing that's reopened so far is the airport, and even then they're saying if you have plans to fly in or out in the next couple of days, call your carriers. So this was a bad one, and I empathize because I've been through a couple of bad quakes along with Claire here. So our thoughts are with those people up in Alaska. It's going to be a while before we know really how bad it is, because a lot of the areas of Alaska, they don't even have roads. Alaska's held together by bush pilots, and it may be a long time, and along the coast they use boats. So we may not find out just how bad it is for a little while here. All right, the other big news, of course, is the G20 is underway, and after days of flipping back and forth over this whole issue, it finally came down that Trump and Putin did not hold a brief impromptu meeting at the G20. They basically just walked past each other. And I have to tell you, the fact that Trump did flip-flop on this so many times is sending a very bad signal. It's telling us that he is, in fact, a weak leader. He's too easily swayed by his own staff. And the White House staff is running the country. And we didn't vote for those people here. So, alrighty. Now, Putin, on the other hand, did meet with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And it was apparently energetic, and there was, high-fiving and, just really having a good time about that. So what's going on here? Well, maybe Putin is getting ready to come up with an oil deal with bin Salman to form a new cartel, one that would completely negate the influence of the US dollar. Because remember, that's the whole reason for OPEC to exist. It goes back to the petrodollar. Part of the obligation of OPEC is they will sell their oil only for US dollars, invest them in the US economy. And right now, Saudi Arabia is facing a mutiny among the other OPEC members who are now objecting to excessive and problematic U.S. influence. So, if there is a deal between Putin and Mohammed bin Salman, along with the Russian and Saudi energy ministers, they could actually dictate the course of global oil prices for the foreseeable future. And for the American oil industry, which is looking at $50 a barrel crude and thinking about getting into another line of work, that would be a bad thing. Now, behind all of this Saudi-Russia talks are suspicions Saudi Arabia has been accelerating production of oil beyond the cuts adopted by OPEC in November of 2016 to placate President Trump. And they may well be doing that. And if he is, that would certainly be a motive for, shall we say, the CIA to gin up this whole Khashoggi business in an effort to get Mohammed bin Salman out of power. Now, the other big event that is coming up, of course, is this dinner meeting between Donald Trump and China's President Xi Jinping. And Goldman Sachs analysts are out there saying, don't expect too much. That the most likely outcome is going to be more escalation of the tariff wars. And it would be nice to see something come out of it, something positive. But the analysts are saying, no, it doesn't really look like it's going to come that way here. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network here. A couple of side issues about the G20. Apparently, when France's President Macron arrived at the airport, there was nobody there to meet him officially. So the media shot a video of him shaking hands with the airport staff. Oh, how far Macron's star has fallen. Meanwhile, part of the issue may be the friction building between France and Japan over the Renault-Nissan scandal. And that's being fueled by the recent arrest of former Nissan chairman Carlos Ghosn over suspected financial misconduct. And it's put the 19-year alliance between the French and Japanese automotive giants under severe strain. Now, LSE Palace has confirmed that Macron and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe will meet today to discuss the Ghosn case. See what's going to come on out of that. Angela Merkel, of course, is a latecomer to the G20, and it turns out the problems with her aircraft were a little more serious than originally reported. About an hour after taking off on her way to Argentina, and while her plane was flying over the Netherlands, the entire communication system broke down. And that forced the crew to divert over to Cologne and to communicate with the ground using an onboard satellite phone. So that is pretty serious there. And for you fans of Boeing, this was an Airbus. All right. The other big story that's still out there brewing is the Kerch Straits and what is going to happen. And again, for those of you who are a little late to the table, this is something that happened last Sunday when 3 Ukrainian naval vessels heading from the Black Sea to the Azov Sea tried to pass through the strait without obtaining permission from Russia, which means they illegally crossed the country's sea border. Now, the European Council President Donald Tusk has said today he was absolutely sure the European Union leaders would roll out more sanctions against Russia due to Moscow's response to Ukraine's naval activity in the Kerch Strait. Even though Ukraine clearly staged the provocation here. Now, frankly, I view these tensions as very dangerous. If the rhetoric could ratchet down, Russia could return the ships, and everything would settle out. But it just keeps going up. And Tusk is out there saying that the EU is united in its support of Ukrainian sovereignty and territorial integrity, which means this is all about Crimea again. Now, a close senior political ally of German Chancellor Angela Merkel, in an interview in Reuters, said that the European Union and the United States should consider banning all Russian ships that originate from the Sea of Azov from entering any European Union and U.S. ports. This is a German conservative, Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, who was said to be most likely to succeed Merkel as leader of the Christian Democratic Union. And one answer could be to stop Russian ships coming from the region from entering European U.S. Sorry, that paragraph got repeated twice here. But basically, there is an issue with that. What he's talking about is a naval blockade. And a naval blockade is an act of war. So I think they're going to force a confrontation, and the issue once again is going to be Crimea. There have been people in the EU and the United States saying that the U.S. should just go ahead and bomb that bridge that Russia built over the Kerch Straits to Crimea. Just take it out completely. So apparently President Poroshenko is all over Ukrainian television saying the threat of full-scale war with Russia could be imminent. And he's trying to send a signal to NATO. Come on in on this thing. Poroshenko knows he cannot take on Russia all by himself. He's had his hands full just trying to deal with the Donbass. Alrighty. Great Britain is getting ready to send Marines and a warship to Ukraine, quote, for the sake of democracy. Because, you know, when the people of Crimea vote to leave Ukraine, well, we can't tolerate that. That's, well, yes, it's democracy, but we still can't tolerate that. It's like a catchphrase. Whatever you do, you're going to bomb somebody, you're going to send your ships, Marines, everything. Oh, we're doing it for democracy. Really? How come we can't make up our own minds about these things? If you support democracy, how about let the ordinary people of Great Britain vote on whether they want to get into another war, this one potentially with Russia. So, anyway, Defense Secretary Gavin Williams came on out and said, as long as Ukraine faces Russian hostilities, it will find a steadfast partner in the United Kingdom. The only problem with that, of course, is it's Ukraine that is the hostile party here. It's Ukraine that is making war on eastern Ukraine. It is Ukraine that basically sailed into Russia's territorial waters without their permission and then refused a lawful order to stop. Now, Poroshenko is upping the ante, claiming that he has photographs of Russian tanks lining up along the border with Ukraine. Now, we've been through this once before. When Poroshenko first came to power, I mean, he's been screaming about imminent Russian invasion ever since he had that coup d'etat backed by the United States. And every time he's shown photos, they turn out to be the inevitable blurry, black and white, can't really see what's in there, while the talking heads say, trust us, that's a Russian tank. And remember, there was that one time when Ukraine bought these totally junked up, useless Russian tanks and brought them back into Ukraine by a very circuitous rail route. And at the time, it was suggested that what Poroshenko was going to do was to take these tanks, give them a new paint job, make them look like their current Soviet tanks, take them out to the border and blow them up and say, oh, Russia attacked, the war is on. Now, it is important to remember that Ukraine, back when it was all buddy-buddy with the Soviet Union, ran one of the major repair and storage facilities for Soviet tanks. And they've got a lot of them. Don't know if they're all working. But he's got the set pieces he needs to try and stage something. So we need to keep that in our mind here. And Ukraine is now banning all Russian men from entering the country to express his displeasure. So, anyway, Pat Buchanan wrote an article a couple of days ago, and we did mention it, but it bears mentioning again. Is Putin really the provocateur in the Kerch crisis? No, of course he isn't. Ukraine is. Ukraine just sailed right on in to Russian territorial waters without asking permission. There's a formal process there. when you go into other people's territorial waters. In the case of Russia, you apply for permission to go through the strait 48 hours in advance. And then 24 hours in advance, you reconfirm that you're going to do that. And that way, all the harbor masters, people who are keeping an eye on the traffic through the strait, they know who's there. Avoid collisions, just manage it. All straits and canals operate the same way. It's like being in an aircraft. You keep the tower informed of where you are. So anyway, Pat Buchanan is out there, and he's basically saying that the issue is that Ukraine wants Crimea back, and the U.S. wants Ukraine to have Crimea back because that would deny Russia having a warm water seaport. It is an area of major strategic significance for naval combat, certainly within the Mediterranean itself and projecting power out into the North Atlantic. Is that worth going to war for? I don't think so, but I'm not calling the shots here. Paul Craig Roberts, on the other hand, came out with an article with a very good observation, saying that Russia is disadvantaged by her belief that the West is governed by law. And boy, has he nailed that one right, especially here in the United States of America. Our government has gone totally outlaw. It's gone totally rogue. Former German foreign minister came out and said exactly the same thing. The United States is a rogue nuclear nation. And again, Paul Craig Roberts points out, it was these Ukrainian military ships violated the Russian restrictions in the Sea of Azov and Articles 19 and 21 of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Paul Craig Roberts is of the opinion that Washington was behind this and that Ukraine would not undertake such a provocation on its own. And I tend to agree with him because there was this story about, I think it was 4 weeks ago, on how Pentagon officials and some State Department officials had gone to Ukraine for a meeting with Poroshenko. And the story did say that the issue of the Azov Sea was on the agenda. So, anyway. Get on back here. Donald Trump has come on out, and again, he's flip-flopped. It was only a few days ago he was saying, I want to get out of the Middle East. The only reason to stay is Israel. Well, again, it's different. Now he's saying that all of his experts all say that U.S. troops need to stay in Afghanistan. Now, maybe his experts are just the people who run that oil pipeline and the drug lords, because we're not doing very well there. We're not doing well at all. Back at the end of 2001, the Taliban were all but eradicated from Afghanistan. And today, they're back in control of the majority of the territory. They're just wearing the United States down. The United States fell into the same trap as other empires that went into Afghanistan, like Great Britain and the Soviet Union. And as I've mentioned before, the last military commander to totally conquer and hold Afghanistan was Alexander the Great, and he only kept it for 3 years. There's a reason it's called the graveyard of empires. And I'm sure Putin is laughing his head off that the U.S. fell into this. Meanwhile, the oil is flowing at below market transit rates, and the poppies are blooming. Poppies, poppies, poppies. We'll be back after these words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're still watching the news coverage of that horrible quake up there in Anchorage. And again, it's going to be a while before we find out just how bad it really was. Okay, so we're talking about wars. And Trump is out there now saying that all of the experts, the experts, the ones that you're supposed to just listened to without question, are all saying the U.S. troops need to stay in Afghanistan. We've been there long enough. We've been there 17 years. We haven't really achieved much of anything except to put in a puppet government and a pipeline and grab the opium. That's it. I think probably most Americans are going to say, it's not worth it. Let's buy the poppies. Let's pay the full price for the pipeline right away. That's what really started the whole war in Afghanistan. The plans to go into Afghanistan existed long before 9/11 happened. 9/11 was just to sell it to you. Oh, look what Afghanistan has done. We must give them what for. Followed by Iraq. You know, we were wrong. Afghanistan didn't do 9/11. Iraq did. Well, those Iraqi people, we must give them what for. And I'm sure at some point they're going to say, you know, it might have actually been Iran that did 9/11. Anyway, over in Syria, there's still a tremendous amount of confusion regarding exactly what happened over the Al-Kiswa district south of Damascus. And at this point, the targets are being described as unidentified aerial objects. Apparently, wherever the debris came down, they can't get at it or they can't find it. A lot of open territory there. It would take a while to search, you know. Israel is still insisting that they did not lose a warplane, and the Syrian forces seem to be backing off of that. So, again. Now, here's where things are getting a little sticky and why Israel may have launched the attack. Oh, by the way, there's one more little fact. Apparently, the S-300 missiles were not used during that attack. I guess they're still training up or something, but these cruise missiles that were intercepted were done with Syria's existing air defense system. So the reason Israel may be willing to risk their planes, because Israel had no way of knowing the S-300 wasn't going to be used, because Netanyahu is getting himself painted into a corner. And for most of his time in office, he's got a very strong ruling coalition. And he could get whatever wars he wanted. And now Netanyahu's once stable coalition is in trouble. Now, it all began with the resignation of the country's extremist defense minister, Avigdor Lieberman, who quit his post 2 days after the Gaza attack in protest over what he saw as Israel's surrender to the Palestinian resistance. So now Netanyahu's coalition is hanging by a thread. He's got the support of only 61 members in the Knesset. That's a margin of one. One wrong move, and Netanyahu could find himself forced into a snap general election, which is something he does not want to have to do right now. Okay, Netanyahu, and this strikes me as a really sick thing to campaign on for the coming elections, but in Israel, killing Palestinians is good politics here. And so he's angling to institute capital punishment for Palestinians just in time for the elections. And basically, he's basing this on how last Sunday, 5 Palestinian citizens in Al-Qadar village south of Bethlehem were detained by Israeli occupying forces without charges leveled against them, which is common enough. But now, on top of the violent and indiscriminate means of detaining Palestinians, there may be even more reason besides Israel's contempt for due process to fear for the prisoners' fates. If Netanyahu gets his way, Israel will be able to add among its repertoire of an unwritten constitution and ethno-nationalist basic laws the right to put Palestinians to death. Apparently, just because. Over at the Israel Supreme Court, they've issued a new ruling that gives backing to the increased use of torture, or as they like to call it, enhanced interrogation methods. This is the second such ruling in the last year, and a number of human rights groups have documented routine use of torture by Israeli forces. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go right to the telephones to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I got a suggestion. I think we ought to, people who are really concerned about what's going on in the world and peace and all that should consider trying to convince Rand Paul maybe to team up with Cynthia McKinney and run third-party peace party for 2020. This stuff got to stop before we get ourselves in a nuclear war. Trump is too stupid, I think, to understand what he's getting into. Now he's listening to these European countries that started World War I and started World War II. We got Britain, Germany, and France. They're the ones with the loudest mouth now towards Russia. Russia could squash them like they do an ant, and yet they're ready to, like Theresa May is probably using Russia as the big bad ogre. Yes. Because she still does move. She's trying to avoid Brexit, and the Germans now, they're making that, of all people, shouldn't be making any kind of noise. Personally, I believe that Russia, when they finally did disband the Soviet Union, should at least insisted that they keep a corridor open, continue to occupy East Germany, because these people, if they get a little bit of power and they start getting, they start feeling the roads, they start thinking, I guess they can conquer things again. So they should, they should have learned after World War II.
What they're trying to do is expand their territory and their wealth slowly and stealthily, and the idea is it's a game of brinksmanship. When it breaks into actual open war, it means somebody failed miserably to keep things under control. Now, when the Soviet Union broke up and Germany reunified, NATO did promise that they would not extend their border any further than the eastern edge of Germany. But of course, almost immediately they started, grabbing other Balkan countries and bringing them back into NATO. And now NATO is right up on the border with Russia, and that's making Russia very, very nervous.
Of course, for good reason. NATO is nothing but the military arm of the New World Order of globalism, and they're using us. They're using our troops, and Trump is falling right into this trap. He can't control these neocons. Maybe he doesn't want to control them. I don't know what the deal is. Now this thing with Afghanistan, it's a disgrace. I mean, we lost 4 more troops last week in Afghanistan. Yes. For what? They're not defending this country. They got to understand.
For oil and opium, that's what they're dying for.
Yeah.
In Afghan fields, the poppies grow, between the crosses, row on row.
And the same thing with his troops that got into Syria. They're not defending this country. Not at all. I don't know who they're defending, but it isn't us. Maybe they're defending Israel. Maybe they're defending the oil interests. Maybe both. I don't know. But they're not defending this country.
Yeah, it's oil and Israel. I mean, the United States is not being attacked by anybody. I mean, every time they sell us one of these horses, well, we could be attacked. Iraq had nuclear weapons. They could have decided to just nuke us without warning. Really? It never made any sense. The United States has the world's largest nuclear arsenal. Nobody's going to attack us. Nobody's going to invade us except for those migrants down there at the fence there in San Diego. And
I'm sorry. I'm saying, I know you don't believe in this stuff. I kind of half believe it. But I think we're in far more danger if we're going to be attacked and invaded from people from another planet. I don't think it's going to happen. Don't get me wrong. But there's probably far more danger than that anybody's going to actually think any foreign military is going to try to attack the United States. Because just as you said, tremendous nuclear arsenal, huge army, it's just not going to happen. And a big ocean separating us from any potential enemies.
True.
So there's just not going to, like I said, more of a chance that, I don't know, Martians or wherever other planet they might come from, attack not only the U.S., but other countries too. But
what do we have here on Earth that would be worth the time, trouble, and expense?
I don't know. I mean, if you ever watch Ancient Aliens, they believe, that these people were here before. I don't know if that's really true or not. I mean, there are certain things they point out, but, it is a pretty fertile planet. You don't know what they may have done to their own planet if there is another planet out there with people, but
I'm absolutely convinced that the universe is filled with intelligent life and intelligent civilizations. I don't think we have anything they'd be interested in, because your society evolves with your technology. And to a culture that's capable of interstellar travel, we'd look like a bunch of primitive natives with bones still poking through our noses. And, given the cost of coming here and then leaving again, there's really not much of anything we have, unless somebody gets like a scholarship to study our unique cultural history.
Or a warlike manner,
Yeah, that's the other problem. I mean, a visiting space alien has to realize they risk getting shot at if they get too close.
Supposedly it's happened already. I don't know if it's true or not, but supposedly it happened. I mean, I watch this stuff sometimes on a History Channel. As a matter of fact, talk about Russia with the Soviet Union. Supposedly, I believe in 1948, 49, they knocked down they lost one of their planes too, but they knocked down a alien ship over one of their secret bases.
Okay, Mark.
Whether that's true or not,
yeah,
so,
Mark.
I know you don't believe that. Yeah.
Well, what you need to understand, Mark, is that United States propagandists created this whole alien flying saucer UFO thing as a cover for the development of Black Project aircraft. Project Blue Book was not there to record incidents of flying saucers, but to manufacture them. In fact, if you go back and look at the history of TV shows and movies that really push that idea of flying saucers and alien visitation, you find that they line up with the development and testing schedule of some of our most top secret aircraft, like the SR-71 and the F-117 and Half Blue and all the rest of those. And so the idea was very, very simple. If you're out there in the desert and something flashes by over your head, you run into town and say, I just saw an alien spaceship. And you ignore that little hangar at the end of that little runway out there in the middle of the desert.
Yeah, well, you're probably right, Mike. Like I said, though, I don't totally discount this stuff either. Some of the stuff I've seen they've shown, like that. Another one was that base in Great Britain, a U.S. Air Force base in Great Britain, I believe in the 1980s. I forget the name of it, but supposedly these were security police came out of alien
Yeah,
ships.
I've heard the story. I have heard the story. And again, it's sensationalism for the sake of building an audience. Anyway, Mark, I want to get back to the news here because there's a lot of stuff going on. So thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open again. And apparently Alaska's congressional delegation is now holding a news conference on the quake. And obviously they've been on the phone lines back to their home state getting the information. Apparently some of the TV stations in the Anchorage area were literally knocked off the air. And they're just getting back online as well. So anyway, like I said, our thoughts are with all those people. Okay, we're going to take another phone call. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I'm calling Mike today about the Netanyahu and Israel trying to institute the death penalty for the Palestinians, which I want to point out, they do not have a death penalty for themselves.
Yes.
They also do not have a death penalty. They will not extradite a criminal from Israel to a country that has the death penalty.
Yes.
And I also want to point out that they have carried out for 70 years thousands of extrajudicial assassinations.
Yes.
Without any trial whatsoever. They have indefinite detention, administrative detention, without any trial at all. They can keep you in jail forever. And almost all their laws, especially aimed at the Palestinians, are were lumped into terrorism, some sort of terrorism law. Terrorism could be anything from Tamini slapping that guy from after shooting her cousin in the face and coming into her yard. That could be terrorism. Anything could be terrorism, and anything will be open to basically Israel just killing them and having some sort of a legislative cover now and judicial cover. It's awful. You see what the settlers for doing real terrorism, beating people, killing people, setting them on fire. Nobody ever gets arrested for terrorism on that.
Nope.
Yet the Palestinians, they'll wipe out 3,500 in Gaza or something every couple of years or what have you. And it's far worse than anything the South Africans under the old Afrikaner regime had. They never white phosphorus Soweto with F-16s and Apaches, but the Israelis do that routinely. So this is really a step up in barbarity, even for them and their Jewish supremacists. Even for them, this is really, really stretching it.
Well, there have been unjust regimes throughout history here, and you're right. Israel has been carrying out executions of Palestinians. They just want to say, it's the law. It's okay for us to do this. So stop complaining about it. Stop criticizing us.
And they're hoping, Mike, that nobody will look at the fact that they don't execute their own people. Again, it's an apartheid, a special set of rules for the oppressed, and the overlord supremacists, nothing at all for them. It really, every day I get up and they hit me with something new. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it is. And I actually got an email once that said, why do you spend so much time, talking about Israel? And I said, because they're doing so much that's bad.
You know what, Mike? I started listening to you right after 9/11. Okay. And, at first I thought, for about the first 3 weeks, I bought the 911 story. And then I began to think about it, and I started to investigate it on the web, and I came across what really happened. And you and Justin Raimondo at the time were the only people with the stones big enough to confront this. And I thought, I've been hooked on you ever since. So, it's so like the guy from CNN who came out the other day, and now he's gone, right?
Yes.
Into the netherworld now. But it's just, that's how I came to, because I know what kind of courage it takes to confront this. And you're one of a small handful. So.
Well, thank you for those kind words. Anything else,
It's Peter? Not kind words, Mike. That's a freaking fact, man. But anyway, listen, I'll let you go. I just wanted to hear what your take was on this. If you could develop a little further on that death penalty thing. So, but I got to sign off. I got to pick up my little girl.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call. And it's amazing. We're in this kind of very almost twilight zone, where Israel supporters are out there saying, don't criticize them, don't equate them, with the Nazis, don't say they're apartheid. And yet every day the government of Israel takes another step in those very directions. All right, now, the U.S. State Department is basically warning that the United States will not hesitate to use military force against Iran in order to coerce their compliance with whatever it is they're going to ask Iran to do next. And, of course, there's nothing new. The U.S. has been threatening to attack Iran for decades now. Now, the threats had calmed down with the P5+1 nuclear deal, but with the deal basically thrown in the shredder by the Trump administration, the old status quo has come back. Sanctions and threats, sanctions and threats. And It's because the United States needs Iran to sell their oil only for the dollar. The private central bankers want Iran enslaved to a private central bank. Iran has a public bank and a value-based currency. And Israel wants another regional rival broken up into little tiny pieces like happened to Iraq. So, over in the United Nations, the British government tried to put forward a resolution calling for a Yemen ceasefire, and it was blocked by heavy lobbying from Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, the chief participants in the war. The resolution would have called for a halt to fighting in the vital aid port of Hodeidah. Now, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman was very public in his opposition to the ceasefire, with British officials saying he threw a fit about their proposal, saying it weakened the Saudi position on the war. Now, here in the United States, there was an attempt to pass a resolution limiting the United States' involvement in the war in Yemen. And at least 5 of the 37 Republican senators who voted against that bill received campaign contributions from pro-Saudi lobbying groups. The finest government that money can buy. Roy Blount, John Boozman, Richard Burr, Mike Crapo, and Tim Scott all received financial contributions from firms representing Saudi interests between 2016 and 2017, according to the Center for International Policy. And all 5 Republicans voted on Wednesday against advancing the resolution, which, if passed, would have forced the United States to limit its support for the Saudi-UAE war in Yemen. All right, now we've been talking about actually we're coming up here on another commercial break. So, we'll be back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. I was just looking online at some of the videos of the protesters down there at the G20, and it's quite large, clearly organized, very peaceful, at least so far here. Still keeping tabs on the Alaskan earthquake, and I guess Anchorage is going to take years to recover from it. But, you know, if you live someplace like that, it's a risk you accept. When Claire and I lived in Southern California, it was a risk we had to accept, and we went through a couple of really big quakes ourselves, especially the Northridge quake. Alrighty, getting on back to the international news. We've been talking about over in France the riots against the government over fuel tariffs, various other issues. It's starting to turn out there's a lot of things the French people are angry about, and it's become what's called the yellow vest protest, because it's apparently sort of like their symbol. The yellow jackets have become a symbol of the protest in France. Now it's taking off in Brussels. And it got really kind of ugly. And the police had to disperse the riots with water cannons and tear gas. So, what is going on here? How did this leap from France to Brussels, to Belgium? Well, many moons ago, I made the observation that this push to create a global government was actually creating the political climate for a global revolution. And this may be the beginning of it. This may be the beginning of all of Europe's working class people standing up and saying, no more, we are done. No more open borders, no more of this tinkering with our lives, with all this liberalism. Revolutions can come out of nowhere and happen very fast. I don't want to see it happen, but it does seem like neither side is willing to back down. People who want freedom, they want the right to live their lives the way that they choose, versus ever encroaching government. We're seeing it all over Europe. We're seeing it here. Anyway, let's see. China is very concerned about Japan, which has just signed an order for the F-35 stealth jets, including the ones that can do vertical takeoff and landing. And this might encourage Japan to convert some of their carriers for these fighter jets. Now, since the end of World War II, Japan's military has been constrained to be a self-defense unit. And apparently, Tokyo has now decided to modify an aircraft carrier. Actually, it's a helicopter carrier to carry the F-35, the fighter jets. This move would put Japan back in the power projection business in a way it hasn't been since 1944. We'll be back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We're talking about the international news, and Beijing, once again, is wagging their fingers at the United States for sending naval vessels close to these islands in the South China Sea, where Beijing has built military installations. Now, the U.S. and its allies have recently sent planes and warships to the area for what are called freedom of navigation operations, which is a polite word for we're going to get in your face and see who blinks first. And basically trying to say, signal their right under international law to pass through the waters claimed by China. Now, the USS Chancellorsville guided missile destroyer on Monday entered waters off the Paracel Islands, known as Zishu in Chinese People's Liberation Army. Southern Theater spokesman Li Haomin said. Aircraft and warships were scrambled, sending out warnings for the American vessels to leave the area. That was a very reckless thing to do on the eve of Trump's and Xi Jinping's sit-down dinner meeting to try and talk about the trade war. It almost seems like the Pentagon is using military actions to try and sabotage the possibility of Trump accomplishing anything at the G20. One of the major reasons for Ukraine to have sailed through the Kerch Strait and set off that provocation with Russia was to kill the meeting that was supposed to take place between Trump and Putin. I'm getting a very strong feeling it's not clear who's actually running this country right now. And that's a little unsettling. A little bit of good news. South Korea has sent a train into North Korea for the first time in a decade. And again, they're sending all the signs of reunification. The train pulled 6 cars carrying dozens of South Korean officials and experts who will undertake an 18-day, 750-mile survey of the railway tracks in the north. The journey required special permission from the United Nations to carry equipment and fuel into the north despite the sanctions regime. And apparently they got it. So that's a good sign there. Over in Europe, NATO's chief Jens Stoltenberg is out there starting to brag about how in 2020 the United States will begin to deploy in Italy, Germany, Belgium, and Holland nuclear bombs that are precision guided. Right now, those countries are places where the U.S. stockpiles what's called the B-61 gravity bomb, which is basically just as the name says. You drop it out of an airplane under gravity. You've aimed it at the target with a bomb sight, and given that it's a nuclear weapon, if it misses by a few yards, it doesn't really matter. But apparently, the U.S. has been spending your money on what's called the B-61-12, and it is designed primarily as an anti-Russia weapon. It has a penetrating capacity, allowing it to explode underground in order to destroy Central Command bunkers in the first strike. Now, question, how would the United States feel if Russia deployed nuclear weapons in Mexico or Canada? Now, since Italy and the other countries are allowing the USA to use its bases, they're violating the Non-Proliferation Treaty. This is going to end badly. All right, let's see. Okay, they're talking about how back at the G20, Trump signed a new trade deal with Mexico and Canada. So at least he's getting something done. I know our Canadian listeners are going to be pleased to hear that. Turning to our domestic politics, the saga of former FBI Director James Comey continues. As you know, the House Judiciary Committee have wanted to talk to him alongside the House Oversight Committee. And they've been conducting an investigation into the Justice Department and FBI's actions ahead of the 2016 presidential election. This includes the probe into Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server on which she kept classified information. And the chairman of both committees wrote a letter to Comey on September 21st requesting that he appear voluntarily for a closed-door interview. Comey said, no, I'm not going to do that. So the House Republicans issued a subpoena to compel him to come on in and answer their questions. James Comey has gone to court. He's filing a lawsuit to try and get a judge to squash the subpoena. Well, James, you might as well put a flashing neon light on your forehead saying guilty, 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 because it certainly looks like you've got something to hide. And in any event, I think not only is this an attempt to defy Congress oversight responsibilities, but asking the judiciary to come on in and override the Congress violates the separation of powers doctrine. So this is an act of utter desperation here. All right, we're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, with this whole email thing starting to circulate around, you've probably seen in the corporate media this attempt to equate Ivanka Trump and Hillary Clinton by saying that Ivanka Trump has used a private email account to conduct some of her government business. Of course, the two are not even close. Ivanka Trump is using a regular commercial email service when she couldn't get to the classified systems or whatever it is she's supposed to be using. She certainly did not have a server in her own home, and she's not sending classified information. This is an attempt to equate the two. This is a warning shot by Hillary Clinton saying that if the Trump administration continues to push on the email server, they're going to find some way to go after Ivanka Trump and just bring her down. The politics of personal destruction. So Comey is going to court to try and refuse the subpoena here. Meanwhile, interesting little story, article by Piers Morgan over in the Daily Mail, talking about Robert Mueller. It says, Mueller has tortured enough minnows and made enough noise, but if he hasn't got the goods to nail Trump the whale by now, he should shut up shop and go home. Everybody's getting tired of this thing. If Mueller had anything on Trump, they would have used it going into the midterms. And of course, everybody's kind of wondering what's going on with Michael Cohen. Does he actually have any evidence to implicate the president in wrongdoing? Well, maybe not. Because the reality is that Mueller can't indict Trump on the Moscow hotel project within that Cohen deal. Because all Cohen is saying is that Trump may have known about this deal to build a hotel in Moscow. It's not a crime to build a hotel in Moscow, or at least it wasn't back then. What Mueller was after was just some way of saying there was a line of communication between Trump and Moscow, and therefore there had to be collusion, which is faulty logic. They were talking about a hotel. I love this comment by Tom Fitton over at Judicial Watch. Mueller's special counsel operation is a self-licking ice cream cone. I'm not sure what that means, but it's a colorful image. And he goes on to say, no Russia collusion crimes charged of any American Instead, the only crimes they found are for obstructing, lying to investigators, and a couple of financial crimes. You know, small stuff. Small stuff. And even Tom Fitton is saying Trump should shut it down. Unfortunately, though, I don't think he will. The more I see Trump flip-flop around, he's obviously under the control of the White House staff, and a lot of them still want him gone. He's too easy to manipulate. He's proving to be a very, very weak leader. Now, here's a little bit of good news, okay? Jerome Corsi, as you know, turned down Mueller's office for a plea bargain, offer of a plea bargain. And now he's gone on the offensive. He is going to file a complaint for prosecutorial misconduct against Robert Mueller. And he's assembled a legal team headed by Larry Klayman of Freedom Watch, founder of Judicial Watch. Go get him, Larry. Go get him, Larry. All right. Now, here's another example of why our current FBI is just as crooked as our previous FBI. Because apparently the FBI has raided the home of Dennis Nathan Cain, who was the whistleblower who turned in documents on the Clinton Foundation and the Uranium One deal to the Justice Department's Inspector General and Congressional Intelligence Committees. And apparently, according to Michael Sakaris, who's Cain's lawyer, the FBI raided the home to seize what he legally gave Congress about the Foundation and Uranium One, and said it was an outrageous disregard of his client's protections under the Intelligence Community Whistleblower Protection Act. Yes, that's exactly what it was. Now, this may have been done to chill or head off the hearing that's scheduled for December 5th to update Congress on the status of the investigation regarding the Clinton Foundation and pay for play. Now, that would be a good reason for somebody to start a war as a distraction. Oh, it's December 5th. Let's bomb Ukraine. Pay no attention to the corruption over there. We've got mushroom clouds to show you here. There's a little article came out of 12160.info. 2018 was the year the mainstream media willingly handed over whatever was left of their credibility and dignity over to an aging porn star and her odious, ethically challenged attorney. Yeah, the corporate media just absolutely is. They have abandoned the basic principles of journalism. They have abandoned their traditional responsibility to serve as a check on government abuse. I rewatched that movie that came out recently, Tom Hanks, directed by Steven Spielberg, The Post. In fact, I still got it on my DVR. And I remember when this was all going down, when the Pentagon Papers were coming on out, and it went all the way up to the Supreme Court. Did Richard Nixon have a right to shut down the media? And the Supreme Court, at least back then, said no, because the media exists to serve the governed, not the governors. And I think that's a wonderful, wonderful quote. It was by one of the Supreme Court justices. And that's what the media is supposed to be. That's what the independent media is trying to be right now today. Corporate media gone completely the other way, and I think the story of Mark Lamont Hill illustrates that perfectly. Now, he's a professor at Temple University. He's an advocate for equality and is known as an articulate voice against racism and bigotry among CNN's regular contributors. But CNN has fired him for expressing his belief that Palestinians fit into a vision where all people deserve equal rights. And apparently for CNN, that's too much. No. Palestinians don't deserve equal rights. You know, the Muslims do, and the Hispanics do, and the blacks do, and even the French do, and the Irish. But no, Palestinians, they're Untermenschen. They don't deserve rights. And he got fired. Now, he was only a part-time contributor. It's an embarrassment here. But again, it shows America's corporate media has sold its soul. It's filled with intelligence assets, prostitutes, correspondents. The days of people like Edward R. Murrow appear to be gone. Okay, let's get into the economic news now. There is an article over at the Economic Collapse blog written by Michael Snyder pointing out that just before the crisis in 2008, three things went bad: real estate, oil, and the employment numbers. And he's pointing out it all seems to be happening all over again. Economic activity is starting to slow down significantly. But just like was the case in 2008, those that are running things don't want to admit the reality of what's going on with the economy. Back in 2008, Federal Chair Ben Bernanke insisted the U.S. economy was not heading into a recession. We later learned the recession had already started when he made that statement. Now, of course, during the month of December, the corporate media is going to be telling you the economy is great. You know, everybody's running to the stores, go buy things. It's the holiday shopping season. One of the signs of the decline of the American empire, of course, is our crumbling infrastructure. And over in New Jersey, pardon me, there is this railroad bridge. It's called the Portal Bridge. It's 108 years old. It's owned by Amtrak, and it carries passenger trains over the Hackensack River. And it's in a seriously deteriorated condition. So apparently, some people in New Jersey have started a GoFundMe page to basically get the bridge rebuilt. And their fundraising goal is $920 million, which I wish them luck. I don't think they're going to get it. But you know, if we weren't spending $5 trillion showering the rest of the world with white-hot flaming death, we could fix these bridges. And that would bring jobs back to this country. Because people have to go up on those bridges and put them together. They have to build the components. You want to bring back the jobs? Bring back the money and start investing back in our infrastructure. Now, this article, I think, comes out of the category of signs of the times. Apparently, the latest craze in the stores are installment plans to pay for t-shirts and jeans. And apparently they're attractive because the interest rates are lower than just slapping down the plastic credit card. And apparently there are some companies that are starting up to basically see if they can get people to use this thing. There's one down in Australia called Afterpay, and they're offering installment plans right here in the United States, joining a firm, which is a San Francisco startup, launched by PayPal co-founder Max Levchin. An installment plan for a t-shirt. Boy, oh boy. That tells you things are bad. Alrighty, now, ahead of his meeting with Xi Jinping, Donald Trump is touting the billions of dollars pouring into U.S. coffers from the China tariffs. And he's saying there's a long way to go. Apparently it was one of his Twitter posts here. And he's saying if companies don't want to pay tariffs, build in the USA, otherwise let's just make our country richer than ever before. There are two problems with that. The first is this money isn't pouring into the U.S. as a whole. It's coming into the U.S. government, which I'm sure is grateful for the added cash flow. The problem with the tariffs, and when Trump first came up with this, I made this observation. The United States has lost much of its manufacturing, much of its high-tech. There are companies in China that can make things we no longer know how to make in this country. That's the problem. I know Donald Trump played a businessman on his TV show, but I'm starting to think he wasn't really a good one. Everyone's out there saying he knows more about money and business and everything because he built all these hotels and casinos, one of which I know he bankrupted. And I know that he's been bailed out many times throughout his career. It's easy to look rich when you've got other rich people propping you up. But he didn't think this one all the way through. And I agree with Goldman. I don't think anything good is going to come of that meeting between Trump and Xi Jinping. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We have some callers on the line, and we're going to start with Layla in Ontario. Aloha, Layla. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, Mike. It's the Migrant Compact. I don't know if you've discussed it recently. I haven't heard you discuss it, but it's they're calling it a compact, and it's going to be signed by a number of nations in Marrakesh on December 11th and 12th. Now, some countries have already refused to sign it.
Yes.
But unfortunately, Canada's Trudeau is going to be eager to put the Canadian stamp of approval on it. So, you know the phrase, creating facts on the ground. You know who created that phrase? Israel, the Zionists, when they were planning to take over Palestine. They started moving in illegal migrants, and they eventually created enough facts on the ground that they were able to take over. And that's what they're doing in the West Bank, and they're already talking as though the West Bank belongs to them anyway. And now they're doing that on the southern border. My guess is they're the ones behind the migrants that are coming up, because it's taken millions of dollars to supply for the supply chain all the way up in order to bring them here. Now, if this compact, which, by the way, people are saying, oh, it's just a compact, it's a non-binding agreement. Well, in Black's Law Dictionary, the terms contract and compact are synonymous.
Yes.
And once this compact, which claims to be non-binding, is signed by Canada, that means that Trudeau is going to lower any concept of borders. It's not Trudeau; it's those who are in control of the country right now. So, what's going to happen to the U.S.? Ultimately, there's going to be a rush of migrants to Canada. And they are then going to be squeezing the U.S. from the north and the south. That sandwich that is really going to be creating facts on the ground, both north and south. So I think it might be a good idea to look at the compact. And one of the stipulations, ironically, it has a number of stipulations, and stipulations are also legally binding agreements. So the use of the word compact is just a euphemism of putting, lipstick on a pig or false fragrances on garbage. It's a lethal agreement, and it would be a good idea for people to take a look at it and take it very seriously. One of the other things it includes is a paragraph whereby the media is supposed to be educated and trained not to allow intolerance of the migrants when they come here. Now, I, as a Canadian, have a number of questions with regard to what this compact or contract does to pre-existing obligations. The things that they are going to be giving to these migrants are basically finite resources. So what happens to the obligations that the government has to the citizens of the country who built those resources? Essentially, it's an investment that this generation of Canadians and previous generations made, an investment, assuming that they and their inheritors, their beneficiaries, will be able to receive the dividends. Now, does the government have the right to give away those finite resources, which are already inadequate to meet the existing needs, when they sign this compact and tear down essentially whatever borders, whatever restrictions exist? What happens to the Canadians who are going to be denied their vested interests their vested rights in the existing infrastructure. The whole thing is so bizarre. I don't understand why the legal profession in Canada is not standing up. I don't even understand why the legal profession in the U.S. is not standing up and saying this compact may claim it is non-binding, but ultimately
yes,
it will be de facto a contract.
Well, definitely.
And because essentially it threatens the U.S.
It threatens the sovereignty of every country that signs it. This is a grab by the United Nations to assert authority over the independent member nations of the United Nations. They're basically, the UN is trying to do to the UN member nations what Brussels did to the EU. And the federal government did to the sovereign separate states of the United States. Whittle away at their autonomy and their sovereignty and consolidate control and power.
Well, it's already happened. I mean, it's happening, but it may be too late. I don't know. But it's going to take a massive response, and it must be done very quickly.
Okay, well, Layla, I have to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We have other callers waiting on the line, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And let's see, we've got callers here. The next caller is, well, before I take calls here, I wanted to do a comment. I came back into the office. I'm looking at the feed from Fox News, and the lower third headline, the Democrats gear up for 2020. We're not even out of 2018. They spend all their time campaigning and fighting amongst themselves. No wonder nothing gets done. All right. Don in Iowa, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Yes, this deal of James Comey fighting the subpoena, and he's trying to tie it up in the courts. He says he wants to testify in public. That's exactly what Roger Stone told him. He wanted to fight. He tried to fight like crazy to testify in public. I think Roger Stone had a good reason, and that reason is because people don't get to see what he has to say very much, because they won't have him on CNN. He won't tell. He kind of had a reason for it, but they would not let Roger Stone testify in public. Now, the real reason that Comey, for one thing, he's fighting it just to delay the whole thing, let the clock run out until the Republicans get in office. But besides that, also, he knows that if he's in public, he can. The Democrats get in office. If he testifies in public, he can always say, "Well, that's security." There's a lot more things they can't even talk about. So that's what he really wants to do. Is the reason he wants to be in public is because he can't say anything because everything is classified. So basically, they're going to be talking about a lot of insignificant stuff, probably. But if in a public hearing, because he can always just say, "No, I'm sorry, it's going to reveal sources and this and that." So,
well, I don't care what Comey says. I agree with the theory he's going to try and run the clock out, except we're dealing here with some Senate committees, and the Senate is still going to be under the control of the Republicans. But basically, we all know that James Comey, as head of the FBI, turned a blind eye to Title 18 felony violations committed by then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton using that private email server. Everybody seems to want to protect that. And I've already shared with you why I think that may be. And, of course, the other part is the Clinton Foundation scandals, the Uranium One deal. And it's amazing that the same corporate media that is still out there trying to find some way to say Trump colluded with Russia, they're absolutely silent on these real scandals.
The thing that kind of bothers me, the Republicans, to me, they're not really trying to do anything because they could have sent subpoenas to these people a long, long time ago. They know that the clock's running out. So what they're kind of apparently, and politicians always do this, especially the Republicans, they don't want to do anything. They want to appear to be trying to do something. That's all they want to do. And the swamp will go on. They'll get their paycheck, and they're not going to get killed or so forth and so on. I'll let you go, Mike. Thanks.
All right, thanks an awful lot there, Don. We're going to switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, with all these UFOs flying around, you would think they would shut their turn signals and their headlights off. You know, but they always have their lights on that says "Eat at Joe's, eat at Joe's, eat at Joe's." I mean, if they're going to come here, they would be looking at us from afar. You know, I mean, that's why I always laugh. There's a UFO up. I mean, yeah, with their headlights on. I mean, it's just ludicrous, man.
Yes.
Like, I don't know. I want to get on the real topics. Mike, did you see? You were saying like when Macron landed, you know, he had, but all those. You know, the guys all had yellow vests on.
I didn't notice that. I didn't see the actual video. I was just reading a report.
Yeah, they all had yellow vests on, so I thought that was pretty funny. Because of the people protesting all got yellow vests on over in France.
Yes.
You know? So that's weird, though. Nobody was there to meet him like that. That's bizarre. You know, as a world leader, landing in Argentina. But, Mike, what do you make of Trump, though? I know you talked about this the other day, like about Trump. Well, he's not meeting with Putin, but can that be like a signal, though? Also, like, Trump doesn't really care. He knows, like, Ukraine what was, like, behind this. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't care. He didn't need to talk to Putin because it's just, oh, well. You know what I mean? Like, can that be also that? You don't have to meet him to say that. You know what I mean? He just, if it was important, he would have met him, right? Even though he's getting a lot of pushback to meet Putin. You know what I mean?
Well,
is that possible?
No, I think basically Trump's advisors said, you know, we can't meet with Putin now. Trump has really worried a lot of people in the deep state because during his time in office and even before, he showed a sincere interest in actually wanting to be friends with Putin. He even campaigned on that. He said, let's get off of all of this aggression here. Let's go back to doing business with each other. And, of course, that made him a threat to much of the deep state, like the military-industrial complex. I really do think that Trump's advisors were just trying to find any way they could prevent the meeting from happening. And as a result, Putin and Saudi and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman are all buddy-buddy now. And so there was probably a short-term gain, prevent the Putin-Trump meeting, and there's going to be a long-term cost.
Yeah, did you see that high five? Did you see the Turkish foreign minister looking from afar?
Yep.
And Mike, you know, like with basically you were talking about how, like, you know, when Mark says, you know, the British are not going to do anything against Russia and stuff, because, I mean, the British are, like, really trying to stay relevant because they're not anymore. That's why they always got that coalition, like with the French or the U.S. The British are not going to do anything without the U.S., you know what I mean? Like,
yes.
They need that sidekick appearance there to be, you know, they're just not relevant anymore. I'm not ripping on the British people. It's just, you know, they're not what they used to be. And
no, they aren't. I think the last vestige of the British Empire was the Falkland Islands War, and they didn't really do too well out of that. High cost, low gain. If there is a war coming with Russia, it's not going to be just two different countries. It'll be allies, like World War I and World War II. There's going to be the United States and Great Britain. The NATO countries are going to be basically sitting in the North Atlantic saying this is ours. You're seeing Russia starting to move closer to China and Iran and now Saudi Arabia. That might actually turn out to be the other side.
Hey, Mike, did you know if Argentina had like 25 or 30 Exocet missiles, not 5, they would have sunk all the British ships?
Yes.
You didn't realize that?
That was a real wake-up call for just how effective those Exocets were.
Yep, and the Russian ones are faster than that, so, you know, that's why that should scare the hell out of you, what we're doing, poking the bear. All right, thanks, Mike. Have a good rest of the show.
All right, thanks an awful lot, Dustin. We're going to switch over to Art off the grid. Aloha, Art. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I had not heard about this global compact on migration until the lady just a couple callers ago. And I went immediately, anybody knows me knows, first thing I do is I jump on and I start doing the research. Well, yeah, some people may say that this is a non-binding agreement, but if you go to refugeesmigrants.un.org and you look at this thing, the very first thing you see is the Global Compact for Migration is the first intergovernmentally negotiated agreement prepared under the auspices of the United Nations to cover all dimensions of international migration in a holistic and comprehensive manner. Now, you take that one paragraph right there, that's the first thing you see, and you go directly to the PDF, which I am looking at right now. And you look here, and they say, okay, non-binding agreement, but in the preamble, the second part of the preamble says that this particular compact rests on, and it lists a host of treaties, among which just a few: the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the United Nations Convention Against Transitional Organized Crime, including the Protocol to Prevent, Suppress, and Punish Trafficking in Persons, especially women and children, and the Protocols Against the Smuggling of Migrants by Land, Sea, and Air, the Slavery Convention and the Supplementary Convention of the Abolition of Slavery, the Paris Agreement, the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Now, that dates back to 1960. Now, that's just some of the treaties that this particular non-binding agreement draws its power. So they can say non-binding all they want to, but when you have a non-binding agreement, which is rested solely on a list of, I'm looking at least 12.5 or more different treaties, well, it becomes pretty obvious that this thing is valid. It is just as legitimate as any contract. And when you take that being the second part of the preamble and you look at number 5 of the preamble, where it states, as a contribution to the preparatory process for this global compact, we recognize the inputs shared by member states and relevant stakeholders during the consultation and stock-taking phases, as well as the report to the Secretary General on making migration work for all. Now, Mike, what does that tell you?
Well, basically, it's like Layla pointed on out. They're trying to basically get nations to sign this and surrender their sovereignty and authority over their own borders, and that's exactly what this compact is all about. Because the major issue that it says is that people who are migrants have an automatic right to step across any border that they want, and the country they're stepping into must take them in. And this is perfectly in line with the globalists' one world government agenda. And the United Nations, in the past, has used this claim of a non-binding agreement to basically get nations to sign on, and then all of a sudden you find out deep inside there are some real teeth. And I can think of no better example than the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and some of the accords they were putting on out there, where it was all supposed to be symbolic and, just expressing the concern. But this is definitely an attack by the United Nations on the sovereign nations of the world, basically taking over control of their borders.
Oh yeah, it is, and I'm sitting there listening to you, talking to you, and I'm scrolling through this thing, and folks, it doesn't take much to go over these things. If you just pay attention to what you're doing and you're scrolling, you learn real quick how to do this. And under the section, and here's where it really gets interesting, a section called Our Vision and Guiding Principles. If you scroll down far enough, it makes statements that, like, we agree that this global compact is based on a set of cross-cutting and interdependent guiding principles. And when you scroll down through this, you see gender responsive, people-centered. I mean, this is just absolute turning everything on its head. I mean, this is Orwellian if it ever was, Mike. I don't know how much more obvious this can be for people.
Well, you know something? I'm going to reverse myself on something I said earlier. I do think space aliens have come to the Earth, and as a practical joke, they're dumping LSD into all of our drinking water because the entire human race seems to be going crazy.
I'm telling you what, man. Hey, anyway, thanks a lot, and boy, howdy.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here, and the phone lines are open again. Getting on back to the economic news here. The Frankfurt headquarters of Deutsche Bank have been raided by prosecutors in a money laundering investigation. Now, we're not talking some little tiny hole-in-the-wall bank in the Cayman Islands that was set up specifically to do skullduggery. We're talking Deutsche Bank, one of the world's largest banks. And this is not the first time that they have been accused of financial skullduggery, but apparently police cars were seen outside the tower blocks that house the headquarters of Germany's biggest bank. And it's not just in Germany, they are global. And apparently 5 other Deutsche offices in the city were searched for in an operation involving about 170 police and officials. And prosecutors are basically looking into whether Deutsche Bank staff help clients set up offshore accounts to transfer money from criminal activities, which is, of course, what money laundering is. So Jesse James was right. The real outlaws are the bankers here. Now, as you know, over in Lordstown, Ohio, yesterday, General Motors closed their factory and put 15,000 people out of work. And it's among the 5 GM plants across North America expected to close next year. And apparently the 15,000 jobs are across all 5 of those plants. But apparently the employees, the GM workers, held a meeting, vigil, prayer meeting outside, hugging each other. About what a devastating disaster this is to happen to them, especially just weeks before Christmas. I remember when Aloha Airlines went out of business. We made a video about it. It's over on our YouTube channel. Now, Donald Trump, of course, is dealing with a little bit of a political firestorm over General Motors because General Motors got these huge tax breaks, they got these subsidies, and they were supposed to bring the jobs back, and it didn't happen. So Trump is now out there saying that he plans to end subsidies for electric vehicles. And then he finishes off by saying, I'm here to protect America's workers. Don't think did a very, very good job here. So you're looking at the price of steel going up because of the tariffs. Price of a lot of raw materials here, and marketing strategy for smaller vehicles didn't work out. A lot of mistakes were made there, but it really comes down to the fact people do not. And aloha America, welcome back to our show here, and we're talking about the economic news. And right now, Bayer, which acquired Monsanto, which then got into legal troubles, they're now dealing with some financial pressure themselves, and Bayer is getting ready to fire 12,000 of their people, roughly 10% of their entire workforce, to cut costs and basically regain investor favor, which has declined because of all these legal setbacks over the purchase of Monsanto, including that monstrous decision against glyphosate in California here. So Werner Baumann, the Bayer chief executive, said, with these measures, we are positioning Bayer optimally for the future as a life sciences company. Boy, that's a stretch. Over in the European Union, they are seriously getting ready to criminalize all speech that criticizes migration. Talk about a dictatorship. The criticism of migration is going to be a criminal offense, and media outlets that give room for criticism of migration can be shut down. So, the European Union is a dictatorship. You will not talk about certain things. In fact, boy, Brussels is starting to act more and more like Berlin under Hitler. If you really think about it, the European Union is accomplishing exactly what Nazi Germany wanted to do: take over control of all of the nations of Europe, including Great Britain. So, down on our southern borders, Mexicali and San Diego, apparently the caravan leaders are going to try a new strategy to build sympathy, to make us all want to just go down and hug these migrants. And they're basically urging the women volunteers to go on a hunger strike. How could you let these women starve to death there on the border when just opening a gate and giving them your money, they could be well fed? And again, one of the reasons we have such a problem on this issue is the lack of enforcement. There are already laws under Title VIII that says you're not allowed to come into this country without going through the legal immigration process, and you're not allowed to help illegal immigrants in this country find work, get a home, even just give them a drive. Those are all offenses. If those laws were being enforced, we wouldn't need a wall. If we would cut off that financial incentive, if we could get the liberals to stop taking stuff away from legal American citizens and giving it to the illegals, the problem would stop immediately. So getting on back to that enforcement issue, apparently none of the migrants who are arrested in the recent border clash are going to be prosecuted. There were 42 arrests. 2 of them were referred to the Justice Department for prosecution, but charges were not filed because the accused had medical conditions. Oh, let's feel bad for the migrants. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here today. We're talking about immigration, and before we hit our station identification, we were talking about how none of the migrants who were arrested during that clash with the border security are going to be prosecuted. 2 of them were referred for prosecution, but were basically, prosecution was dropped because they had medical issues. And this is a big problem. According to Tijuana health officials, 1/3 of the migrants in that caravan are being treated for health issues: respiratory infections, tuberculosis, chicken pox. So you've got 6,000 migrants, and basically 2,200 of them are being treated for these issues. There are 3 confirmed cases of tuberculosis, 4 cases of HIV/AIDS, 4 separate cases of chicken pox. At least 101 migrants have lice and multiple instances of skin infections. And here is the problem. They're all being put into this little tiny area where they can infect each other. And then when they get into the United States, they can infect us. This is not about human rights or migrant. This is a public health crisis in the making. But that has not stopped his popeness from getting on out and calling on migrants to flood the United States. Forget national security. We need more Catholics in those churches. We've got to make bail here. Apparently another archdiocese declared bankruptcy because of the sex scandals here. Now, Trump is expected to extend the stay of the U.S. troops deployment to the Mexico border into January, and I think it's going to be necessary because whoever is setting up these migrants, they're still coming. These caravans, they're still coming. One after the other, after the other, after the other. Now, as I mentioned, I think it was yesterday, the good news is because of all the illness, the cramping, now it's rainy and muddy on top of everything else, a lot of these Central American migrants have decided to call it off. They don't want to wait for the legal asylum process, and they're going back home. Now, when this caravan first started up, there was a video that showed people literally handing out cash to the migrant caravan, the people who were walking in the caravan. So maybe they just figured the money just ran out and going to go back home here. Now, again, Sunday, there was this confrontation between the migrant caravan that the liberals are just gushing over. Oh, aren't they so sweet? And things got violent. Migrants threw rocks and projectiles at the Border Patrol. One San Diego agent said the group, which is made up mostly of men, were using women and children as human shields. Now, the corporate media tried to downplay the violence and say, oh, this is all Trump's fault. How dare you use the tear gas? Forgetting that the Obama administration did exactly the same thing. So, last Monday, Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen released a statement to basically lay out 6 points relating to the caravan, its makeup, and its purpose, and to dispel myths being promulgated in the corporate media. The first myth, of course, is the caravan isn't violent. Obviously, they are. And Nielsen said what happened on Sunday was entirely predictable. That the caravan had been attacking border police in Mexico and other Central American countries. When they came into Mexico, they absolutely bloodied up those Mexican police. So yeah, they're violent. And what corporate media is trying to get on out there is saying that, well, just because you've attacked law enforcement with rocks and sticks and broken bottles, it doesn't mean they're inherently violent. The caravan is large and organized. It's far larger and more organized than previous ones, with upwards of 8,500 members currently in Tijuana and Mexicali. And she made mention, of course, that there are these other caravans making their way to the borders. The other thing that she pointed out is that, by and large, the caravan members are not eligible for asylum. The corporate media and the liberals are out there saying the caravan is full of abused women and children fleeing violence and seeking asylum, despite there actually being a process to seek asylum already in place. And no, it does not involve just stepping over the border. Historically, less than 10% of those who claim asylum from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador are found eligible for asylum. 90% are not. Most of these migrants are coming up here to seek jobs, or they're trying to reunite with family in the U.S., which have already gotten on in. And these migrants have refused to seek protection in Mexico or with a UN refugee agency. They just want to come here. And yes, some of them are criminals. And again, the caravan members are largely male, young males. And apparently, when an MSNBC anchor tried to tee up to a reporter to confirm the caravan was full of women and children, the reporter had to admit it was mostly made up of men because they were right behind him here. And yes, there are criminals among the caravan members. They caught another MS-13 guy the other day who was very open about it. Yes, MS-13, I'm going to get into the United States and I'm going to make a name for myself. And I don't think he's going to do that by being the fastest folder of pizza boxes or something. And apparently the Department of Homeland Security has confirmed the presence of additional criminals. There are apparently over 600 known convicted criminals traveling with the caravan. These are people convicted for assault, battery, drug crimes, burglary, rape, child abuse, and more. And apparently 100 of the caravan members were actually arrested in Mexico for crimes in that country. And nobody was killed or injured during the violence on Sunday. The corporate media was out there trying to say, oh, you risk wounding all these people. And she also made a point that I think we need to remember. If you are concerned about children who are at risk of being injured crossing the border, then don't cross the border. It's the parents' fault. The parents have made a choice to take their children across a border, knowing it is illegal, knowing it's probably defended, knowing they're going to run into tear gas. When you see that one picture that got used all over the place about that woman with the 2 kids and everything, I blame her. If she did not want her children to be gassed with tear gas, she should not have been there. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Over in New Jersey, their Attorney General, Gerber S. Gruel, has ordered county sheriffs to ignore Immigrations and Customs Enforcement detainers if a local judge orders the release of a suspected illegal immigrant who's been charged with a crime. Gruel is also prohibiting police and jail operators from holding a detainee arrested for a minor crime past the time he or she would otherwise be released from custody, simply because ICE has submitted an immigration detainer. Not only that, he forbade them from even notifying ICE of their release. These are all Title VIII violations. And it's creating a schism between the states and the federal government. Now, somebody went on out from the Conservative Tribune, Cillian Zeal, went on out to do a man-on-the-street interview asking millennials what they thought about the idea of birthright citizenship. What was really kind of alarming initially is that a lot of them didn't really understand what it was. But once they found out that Trump wanted to end it, they were absolutely in favor of it. Not because they understood what it meant or what it did, but only because if Trump was going to end it, then they wanted it to go on. That's a very bad way to have politics running in your country, that you make your decisions on policy and agenda because of who supports it and your personal animosities or likes. The United States government is not a social club. It's supposed to be a government. And it's very alarming to see the millennial generation, and yes, it's the fault of Common Core education and pop culture, but they're making all their choices based on their gut emotions. Over in Great Britain, the furor over Brexit is still going on, and apparently Theresa May's Brexit deal was torn apart at the Commons, so they're going back to re-announce it, pre-announce it, and just keep trying to push it on out there until people are so tired of it they're just going to let it walk on through. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen at all. People are getting very angry. Nigel Farage has congratulated, tongue-in-cheek, Barnier on beating Britain in the Brexit talks at a half-empty European Parliament, as the EU insists no other deal is possible than the one put together by Theresa May. And Farage warned the deal is so loathed in Britain that it does not stand a chance of getting backed by MPs, and Britain could be set to crash out without a deal at all. Unless, of course, Europe decides they're going to invade, and maybe that's the reason that France and Germany have been talking about a unified European army. So Farage was saying Theresa May's deal is a good deal for the European Union. For the United Kingdom, it's probably the worst deal in history. Now, the EU lawyers have gone down another tack, and they're arguing that Britain cannot leave, or rather cannot cancel Brexit without the bloc's consent in order to prevent political chaos from engulfing the Union. So now the EU is saying they're going to have to go through with it. And what's going on here is I think they're tired of putting up with the British spirit of independence, but they still want Theresa May's deal. So that's what they're pushing for. You're going to leave, you have to go through with Brexit, but we get Theresa May's deal, which means we get your money and we get to mess around with you as much as we would like here. Now, BBC, the network that reported on the collapse of World Trade Center Building 7 26 minutes before it actually happened, has been caught out again with fake news. Apparently, they had this vicar who was staunchly defending Theresa May's Brexit deal on Monday's Newsnight program, and it turned out she's a paid actor. Now, she's claiming to have been a vicar, to have been ordained someplace in some little parish, but her day job is acting. And her real name is Marina Hayter. And she was on BBC urging viewers to have faith in the government. They know far more about what's going on than we do. That's one of the biggest lies that governments tell their people. There are days I feel that we here in the independent media have a better handle on what's going on. Speaking of Great Britain, British cops have found a new way to find motorists. They've come up with a new idea. Finding motorists for using their cell phones while the car is stationary. Even if your car is at a standstill, the cops will write you a ticket for 200 British pounds. Actually, they do that here in Hawaii. There was a big stink about it. Happened a few years back along Ala Moana Boulevard. There'd been a water main break and traffic was absolutely stopped. People were turning off the car engines. Why waste the gasoline? And they got out their smartphones. But it is illegal to use a smartphone behind the wheel of a car. It's a $300 fine. And the cops just walked down the line of cars writing out these tickets. Now, the state of Indiana is up at the U.S. Supreme Court, and Indiana's Solicitor General is trying to make a case of being allowed to confiscate or forfeit very expensive cars over very minor crimes. And the specific case here had to do with a $42,000 Land Rover taken from Tyson Timms, who sold less than $400 worth of drugs. And basically, this is against the Eighth Amendment. The Eighth Amendment bans excessive fines. But apparently, Indiana's Solicitor General came on out and said, it doesn't apply here. This is a state issue, and it doesn't apply here. And so we can forfeit luxury cars going just 5 miles over the speed limit. So Justice Stephen Breyer asked Solicitor Fisher, Thomas Fisher, if a state needing revenue says anyone who speeds has to forfeit the Bugatti, the Mercedes, or Ferrari. And apparently Fisher said, yeah. So, what this country has become. Anyway, over in Niagara Falls on the Canadian side, there are two separate investigations underway into an altercation, which is Canadian for a fight, between two Niagara Regional Police officers that resulted in one of them shooting the other and putting them in the hospital. So, instead of banning guns, let's ban police. They seem to be more dangerous than ordinary people here. Down in Chicago, good news for a lot of car owners down there. They are dismissing some 23,000 outstanding duplicate vehicle sticker tickets and will refund motorists who have already paid for an additional 12,000 duplicates dating to the early 1990s. Apparently, you have to have a little piece of colored sticky paper on your car, and if you don't, you get a ticket. And if you still don't have it, you got another ticket. But Chicago decided, no, you got your one ticket, that's it. Violates the principle of double jeopardy. So that was a good one there. This next story, this is right out of what's gone wrong with liberalism. And it involves a female Harvard student who had a Make America Great Again hat. and she was sharing a house with these other 6 roommates. And all of a sudden, she comes back to her dorm, if you will, the apartment, from a weekend trip, and was confronted by her roommates who asked if she had guns in the house. And after this Layla Perney said, why is this an issue? The 6 roommates admitted that while she was gone, they had searched the apartment looking for guns. Why did they do that? Well, because she had a Make America Great Again hat on, and she's from Alabama. And so this student said, why don't you just call me and ask me before intruding? And then one of the roommates said that fear took over her body. And the firearms are legally owned, they're properly registered, they're kept locked up. They even had the local police come on over and verify everything was in compliance. And these 6 roommates are saying that this girl, Layla, has to move out because they're just not comfortable with guns in the house. They're traumatized. They can't ever understand why Layla would want to have a gun. Well, because Layla was in an abusive relationship. More about this when we come on back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about this story where there's this female Harvard student who shared a house with 6 other roommates. She went away on a weekend trip. When she came on back, the roommates asked if she had guns, which she did. And she said, why is this an issue? And it turned out the 6 roommates had searched this girl's apartment while she was gone. Didn't ask her if she had guns, didn't say, let's be reasonable. They basically took it upon themselves to go into her apartment and search through all the drawers and under the bed and in the closet until they found the guns. And they did it solely because this student had a Make America Great Again hat and was from the South. Well, of course you're going to have guns. You're from the South. Well, I'm from New England. New Englanders all have guns too. But here's the point. You see the double standard at work there. Forget about the Second Amendment. Forget about a right to privacy. We, the liberals, have a right to go into anybody's place of residence and inspect it to make sure it doesn't have anything that might make us uncomfortable, which was really what the issue was. They're not comfortable being in a house with guns. Now, this student had guns because she had been in an abusive relationship. And she was trained to use them. They're properly registered. They're kept under lock and key. They're perfectly safe. And these 6 roommates basically went to the owner of the building and demanded that either this student with the guns be forced to move out, which would incur significant expense, or they would all move out as a unit, which meant that the girl with the guns would then have to come up with the rent for the entire house, which was something like $6,000 a month. So you can see, this is the way liberals think. I have a right to go in and inspect your life at any time for anything. And if you've got something that makes me uncomfortable, you have to get rid of it or you have to leave. What if you're made uncomfortable by jelly donuts? Do I have to move out for that? What if you had an eating disorder when you were a kid, and I show up, with an angel food cake? Am I the one who has to leave? Do you see how ridiculous this is all getting? And we do see that, where the liberals just have this idea. It's okay for us to just peek at people and violate their privacy and everything because we have rights. We have the right to never be exposed to anything that we would be uncomfortable about. Well, maybe not breaking into her room and searching it in the first place might have been a good idea. And if you think that one is bizarre, down at Oakland University, their response to school shooting is to give their faculty hockey pucks. No, this is not The Onion. According to the university's police chief, the program stemmed from an idea raised during an active shooter training session. And somebody made the comment that they had once been struck in the head with a hockey puck and caused a fair amount of damage, and it might be an effective way of taking down a gunman. And these people are teaching our kids? First of all, the reason a hockey puck can cause a lot of damage is it's being flung at a high rate of speed because of the hockey stick, which I don't see these teachers carrying around with them all day long. And of course, being able to aim a hockey puck takes a great deal of skill and training. But they actually came up with this idea. And it's ridiculous. You have like the Department of Homeland Security. Try and stab the shooter with scissors. That's their advice. Okay, over at the University of California at Santa Cruz, Professor Ryan Coonerty, who's also a former Democratic mayor of Santa Cruz, California, assigned his students an essay featuring a character named Donald Rump, a clear play on the president's name. And Coonerty teaches a course called Problems in Constitutional Law Free Expression. And the essay accounts for 1/3 of the students' final grades. So basically, the essay prompts features Donald Rump, who is described as being known to target women, minorities, and the disabled. And the students are required to analyze a hypothetical scenario in which a student-run group titled Students for Offensive Speech invites a controversial reality TV star to the campus for a speech. In other words, they're just going to play fantasies about, getting Donald Trump to admit that he does things they don't like. It really is absurd here. Okay, artist Kiana McMillan is a feminist, and she claims that women who dress as women are victims of the patriarchy. Does that mean that men who dress like men are victims of the matriarchy? I mean, sometimes girls like to dress like girls. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And Fox News is running a story about riding the wave, about all the California GOP strongholds that fell to Democrats or are falling to Democrats. And Ann Coulter was absolutely right. It's because of all the immigrants coming into this country who are always going to vote Democratic because they get free stuff. We're in the bread and circuses phase of our nation's decline. All right, we got a caller on the line, James in Tokyo. Ohayou gozaimasu. O genki desu ka? What's on your mind today?
Ohayou gozaimasu. Watashi genki desu. First of all, first and foremost, I hope Claire is doing well. You said that she messed your back up or something like that.
Yeah,
she took a
fall. She took a fall, and so it's a bit of a setback for us, but she's doing a lot better now than back when she took the fall, which was just about a week ago. And so as soon as I'm off the radio show, I'm going to wrap her in bubble wrap and just take care of her for the weekend.
Bubble wrap and a massage. That's what you have to do to be a romantic husband, Michael.
Yeah, but there are some complications there having to do with exactly how she took the fall. I'm at the point now where I have to take red and green paint and mark where I can touch her and where I can't.
Yeah, I understand, but I wish her the best. Yeah, you talked about the Harvard roommate that was being searched. In the 80s when I was in university in Montreal, I experienced the same exact thing. I had some roommates search my place when I went away for American Thanksgiving, and I found half of my marijuana gone. So
well,
I
think that Harvard student should have filed charges for unlawful entry, an attempted burglary or something like that. Because we can't have this attitude of, because we're liberal and we're morally superior to you and we have the right to just come on in and be like Big Brother, or in this case, Big Sisters, and make sure you are living your life the way we think you should live it.
And I also had a big argument with an ex-girlfriend of mine who was living with a guy, and she asked me, what do I think of him? And I said, I think he's a very nice gay man. And I got very angry at her when she searched his room when he was gone and found a lot of gay porn magazines under his bed. So I completely understand all that type of stuff. I want to talk about economy a little bit.
Okay.
Last time I talked to you, I mentioned that oil was dropping. I think it dropped about 7% in that day, and it dropped like 7% again a couple days before that. And thanks to your advice, I got out of my refinery. I saved a lot of money. I got to write a check for you for the donation. But I think it's very important time right now. This, I guess, upcoming dinner that's going to happen soon with Trump and Xi. And it's going to be very interesting because I think it's going to really tell how the stock market is going to progress.
Well, there's the other thing to keep an eye on, of course, is the Fed is talking about there will be a rate increase next month, and that's probably going to put the stock market back into turmoil. And they had kind of a good day today. It wasn't really great, but buttons. Well, no, the Dow ended up about 200.
Yeah, they said they're probably going to raise, but then they expressed a desire for it to be like neutral. So you might get one more. So it's basically, I believe, it's going to depend on this China stuff. And for some reason, I think the China tariffs are really good for America. Like, you used to talk about Russia and how when everybody was excluding them from trade deals, that they became more self-sufficient. And I think really America also needs to become more self-sufficient, even if there's some short-time pain.
Well, I would agree with you, but I think it could have been handled better. The fact is that America's manufacturing and agriculture weren't adequately prepared to step on in and fill the gaps when the tariffs started making these foreign products more expensive. And that's why these foreign products are still being bought. And we're seeing this domino effect hitting like the car industry and the food industry. And we're seeing huge numbers of farms declaring bankruptcy. And it wasn't planned out properly. It's almost like these days in Washington, somebody just gets a good idea that sounds good on TV. You know, we're going to tariff China and bring the jobs back. Yes, that sounds good. Let's get out on the 6 o'clock news. They don't actually think it out. Or if there is anybody in Washington, D.C. who's actually looking at the ramifications and how it might evolve, they're not being listened to.
Yeah, the agriculture industry is very messed up right now. It's very hard, but I think that might be a little more due to GMO products, in addition, as well as as well as what's going on with China. But the car industry is very messed up, and I think that the car industry, they probably could have planned everything better. As America's starting to make steel again, but still, the prices are going up because everything is manufactured abroad and sent in, from China. So Americans are going to suffer, some pain, but I just think in the long run, it'll be better, just to have to do this.
It's easy to be.
You can't keep it letting going on and on.
It's easy to look back in hindsight, although a lot of people have been saying this all along. We should not be spending trillions of dollars bringing death to the rest of the world. We should have been investing that in our infrastructure, which is in terrible, terrible condition. And you need that infrastructure to support industry, to get the products from the manufacturers to distribution to the markets. And that's all been allowed to rot away. And unfortunately now that money is gone and we're not going to get it back. And that's why the U.S. government appears to have reached the conclusion they have to go all the way and get the world back to using the U.S. dollar or collapse in the process. And I think it's going to be the latter one.
Well, I agree with that.
Apparently thunderstorms coming on in, so it's going to be a wet night at home. Anyway, James, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go and switch over to Jerry in Toronto. Aloha, Jerry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. I'd like to make you and listeners aware about huge data breach at the Marriott International Hotel chain of the Starwood reservation and guest desk, potentially exposing about 500 million customers to ID theft globally.
Yeah, we talked about this middle of the week.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of your program. You're doing excellent job. I appreciate whatever you do. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Okay, getting on back to the weird world of liberalism. Over in Chicago, there is a transgender woman named B. Sullivan Knopf who is now suing the city because it won't permit a performance based on the fact that men can go bare-chested around, but of a female breast. And whether laws based on binary gender should be applied to non-conforming gender people. Another feminist screed went viral. This one was by Liz Lenz, and it basically is a tale about how she was married for a while, and she began to feel unappreciated. So one day she just decided to stop cooking for her family because she decided cooking was oppressive. And she vowed never to do it again. And to nobody's surprise, the marriage soon fell apart. I experienced a little of that I experienced a lot of that when my first marriage was coming apart. And in hindsight, my then bride wanted the marriage to be over, but she wanted me to be the bad guy. And I used to, every day, whatever Donahue and Oprah and all these other people were screaming about feminism on TV, I got to hear it that night. So, anyway, we've already heard the story about this Megan Murphy was banned from Twitter because she dared to point out that men are not women. And apparently, Murphy wrote that piece for Quillette to basically say, yeah, it used to be a banal thing to say, men are not women. It was like considered common sense. And in the left's crazy mixed up gender world, that's now considered heresy, almost terrorist speech. And apparently a lot of the tech giants are going along with this thing, where that if you say men are men and women are women, that your account can be closed. It really is loopy. It really is loopy. Over in Michigan, lawmakers want to pass a law to ban fast food chains from offering gender-specific toys, which I'll tell you right now is actually going to result in a loss of business for these fast food chains. Because if you take a bunch of boys and girls, and yes, even if you dress them in identical matching jumpsuits, and you put them in a room with a bunch of girl toys and boy toys, the boys will play with the boy toys and the girls will play with the girl toys. It's hardwired in. So if the kid goes into the fast food restaurant and he looks through that little plastic case and doesn't see something that they identify with, or just another icon from a recently released movie, they may decide they want a grown-up meal, or not at all, or not to go back there at all here. Over in Midlothian, Virginia, at the Robius Middle School, they have banned any Christmas carols that mention the name of Jesus. And school administrators are explaining they made the decision to avoid singing anything of a direct sacred nature in order to be more sensitive to the increasing diverse population at the school. And, of course, the parents are not happy about that. Now, Christmas is about supposedly the birthday of Jesus/Joshua Christ, which actually took place in the spring. But the church basically plopped a ceremony over the Feast of the Saturnalia to help itself. But it really is getting ridiculous. It's like Christmas is under attack. It shows verbal abuse by his father and, bullying by his fellow reindeer. Shouldn't show that. Shouldn't show that at all. Okay, let's talk about computers, some stories that are coming on out. As you know, Google right now is under a lot of criticism for what is being called the Dragonfly Project. And this is a project where China wanted Google to create a search engine that could be filtered and censored. And, of course, Google's supposed official purpose is to connect people with information all over the world. And apparently Google shut out privacy and security teams from this project when they got it underway. So go to the new search engines here. Another article, this from Cory Doctorow, and appearing in Activist Post. Yes, the European Union's new copyright directive is all about adding filters. And initially, of course, it's going to be these entertainment industry filters to make sure you're not playing copyrighted material, which shouldn't be. But it's going to grow to political filtering, like we saw here during the run-up to the midterms. There was clear political censorship taking place on our social media. Apparently, Sennheiser's had a little bit of a problem. Sennheiser, as you know, is a manufacturer of headphones, high-end. And apparently, they also make headphones that work through computers, like for gaming sets and so forth. Apparently, the vendor's Head Setup and Head Setup Pro applications install both a root certificate and its secret private key on Windows and Mac computers. And these keys can be used by scumbags to intercept and decrypt users' encrypted HTTPS web browsing. In effect, installing the Head Setup software leaves you open to having your web connection snooped on. Passwords can be stolen. It's a real mess out there. Okay, a couple of consumer product reports here. This is coming out of Natural News. For those people who are lactose intolerant, there's a substitute called almond milk, which is supposedly made from finely ground up almonds and a few other things in there. But apparently the commercially produced almond milk that you will buy at your supermarket is actually a fake beverage that is thickened with carrageenan instead of almonds. And part of that problem is that carrageenan can cause problems in your gut. And it's used in a lot of things as a thickening agent here. It's made from red seaweed. It's added to the almond milk to thicken and stabilize it. And aloha America, welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program on this Pauhana Friday. And apparently there is a new medical issue that is being looked at here in the United States. CDC and for some reason the Department of Defense are investigating this deadly disease. It's caused by this exotic tick, the Asian longhorn tick. It's a very fast multiplying tick, and it can cause human hemorrhagic fever. And apparently this tick is the first invasive tick to arrive in the United States in about 80 years. It's native to eastern China, Japan, the Russian Far East, and the Korean Peninsula, and is now also established in Australia and New Zealand. Now, this particular species of tick reproduces at a much faster rate than most other species. One female tick can reproduce between 1,000 and 2,000 eggs in a single laying. That is very, very serious. And of course, so is hemorrhagic fever, which reminds me, we have not actually heard anything more coming out of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where they were dealing with an Ebola outbreak. So maybe they did succeed in getting it under control. And that would be a really, really good thing. Meanwhile, over at NASA, apparently Curiosity spotted a very shiny rock, a super shiny object, and it was so intriguing that NASA is going to turn Curiosity around and go back and take a closer look. Boy, can you imagine if it turns out to be gold? Boy, the race for space would really be on here. If you're somebody who's been following Curiosity, there have been a couple of times when it would have been a good idea to turn around and go back and take a closer look. And I think that the most interesting one is an image called the Crab. And it was basically Curiosity was driving along this area, and off to one side was this embankment. And in this embankment there was a hole. And protruding out of this hole was something that to me looked like a dead tree branch, root system. Just single log and then spreading out into all the various branches. Other people say could be a crab. Definitely does not look like anything else on the ground. That one they should have gone back and taken a look at, I think. But I really do get the feeling sometime, especially with this newest lander, which is not looking to confirm life, I think NASA doesn't want to look for life. I don't think they want to admit that they were wrong back in 1976, or somebody somewhere is afraid of the sociological changes that would happen if life off of the Earth was actually confirmed. We all speculate it, we all guess about it, we all have our theories about it. Were it actually confirmed, other planets have life, it would be a socially transformative event. We human beings might put down all of our guns and say, let's unite together and find out who's out there. All right, there's the music. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here, share it with everybody that you know. Please donate to Republic Broadcasting. They really need it. The equipment is on its last legs here, and we really do need the help to keep going. So have a really good weekend, and aloha, America.